The lump in the ceiling. Jean had everything to be thankful for. A house paid off, a car paid off, a room of his house dedicated to his passion, movies. He had DVDs on bookshelves that went up high to the ceiling, alphabetized and categorized except for some areas of his collection. Some sections, such as his Disney and DreamWorks collections, were put in a section where every film was ordered by release date. He would hyper-focus on the ordering and label making as he click-clacked along the shelves. In his free time, he read scripts to a lot of his favorite films, and he had hoped that someday he would write a successful movie script to make the box office check twice when they see the numbers. He had a laptop and a couch and a large HD TV to watch all his films. He had a record player, too, with a big vinyl collection of all his favorite movie soundtracks and a bunch of books to read his scripts from his favorite films. Jenny, Jean's sister, was not as obsessed and thought him a little too much so. She appreciated being able to watch most of the movies she wanted to see, but as she yearned to live alone and not with her brother, she began to resent this luxury. It's interesting that A Bug's Life and Ants came out around the same time. They're both computer-animated films about bugs, almost like the two companies were competing. He looked at the two collections filed under D with a reflected speckle in his eye, intensified by the water rising up to the surface. Everyone has to compete with Disney if they even want to be known, of course. A train blew its whistle outside, shaking the house as the monster charged by on its stomping wheels. Jean looked up to see the overhead ceiling fan and light fixture wobbling as the last few boxcars roared on past 688 White Horse Drive. He looked back down to his movies, trying to tune out the train noise as it slowly began to fade away, churning and turning its wheels, burning its fuel, roaring out its devilish whistle. Finally, the noise stopped, and he noticed a movie missing from his library. He searched the whole house for it, asked Jenny if she had it, or let anyone borrow it, or even if she let someone into his library. She denied any involvement with his movies, and particularly that movie, The Godfather. He was beginning to get angry when he realized that it was on his DVD player the entire time. He sighed, apologized, sat down, took a deep breath, and put the movie in to watch. After he had pressed play and he stopped paying attention, Gene laid his head back to look at the ceiling, relaxing the muscles in his neck and even closing his eyes. For a moment he lost all knowledge of his current person, obligations, or anxieties. They all floated away into a universe that existed inside his cranium when he closed his eyes. Stars would be forming in their dusty clouds, swirling and whirling to the bottom of his eyes' vision. The darkness competing with the light coming through his eyelids. And when he opened his eyes, and when he looked back at the ceiling that his face was aimed at, he could really see the ceiling. Popcorns and braille gibberish, ridges of cottage cheese drywall, mountains on a distant moon hovered above his head. Little white dots seemingly moving around like cells or atoms in solid matter. The white and rough terrain canvas above tricked the eyes and flashed colors that also glided along with the dots. However, the more and more he stared at the ceiling, the more he wondered about what was keeping the top floor from crashing onto his head. He was really worried at first at this idea, but came to his senses thinking, "Now that's what them support beams are all about, isn't it?" A more troubling idea entered his mind when he heard his sister's footsteps clunking on the floor above him. What if her couch landed on my couch and crushed my head on the impact? His ideas were running wild, set free by paralyzing fear and cloudy imagination, perhaps inspired by the more gory horror films he had been watching. Set loose by his tendency to worry and doubt, he went outside for a cigarette. His sister begged him to stop smoking inside because it was making her clothes stink. After consideration, he chose to go outside and walk around the property instead to smoke. However, he would sneak one in the bathroom from time to time. Gene pulled out a pack of Marlboro Smooths and a blue lighter while staring at the house. He worried that if too much weight were to be put on one side of the top floor, that the house would fall over as if entirely made of poker cards. The 36-year-old man stood staring wide-eyed at the yellow house with the knowledge that it was built in the late 60s and has only been renovated once. 3 different trains passed by this house, shaking its floors and ceilings each day. Someday, he thought, while I'm showering, my bathroom directly above my bathroom will collapse on top of it. I'll be standing there scrubbing my ass when my head gets smashed like a watermelon getting rolled onto by a bulldozer. These thoughts kept coming and going until he finished his cigarette and went inside to go take a nap. His nap had gone way too long, and he woke up the next morning at 4 a.m. when at last another train came rolling by. His bed shook a bit and scooted towards the wall, clattering and buzzing between the headboard and the dark walnut-colored paneling lining up and down his room. A loud bang came from the other side of the house. He wasn't sure if it was from the bottom floor or the top floor. He jumped out of his bed to his door and opened it. Looking one way down the hall, then the other, he walked towards his library of movies. All clear in that room. He ran upstairs to his sister's room and knocked on the door. There was no answer. He knocked again. What? Finally, a voice. Just checking on you. Heard a loud sound. Oh, it was just my lamp falling off its table, Jean. Damn train. Jean walked off, feeling the walls and the cracks between the floor and the walls. He almost tempted the house to lean a little, the sense of fear really jerking him into believing he would fall down on top of some sharp-edged furniture if he didn't go to the bottom floor. And if he was down there, the fear of believing that the top floor would crush him on impact. It just really couldn't escape his mind. Weeks went by with Jean worrying about this part of the house collapsing. And what if the basement or foundation is too weak to support the whole house? Just one day, a crack spreads, a board breaks, a flood comes and washes us off our feet. His top fear was the scenario where a shower falls on his shower at just a precise angle, crushing, impaling, mangling, and stabbing his naked, wet body. He imagined it would be on a night Jenny was at work. He imagined his last few moments of vision would be a slowly expanding bulge or a lump in the ceiling, and then water leaking through a growing crack. Then quickly, a blur of black and brown plummeting down through above, crashing down onto his head, which may or may not instantly kill him. May or may not. The thought made him shudder. He refused to shower for 2 weeks. Jean, each part of your body has a gross part. We all have them. The ears and nose, the armpits, the leg pits, and everything in between them, behind and front, all the way up and down from your head to your feet and toes. They start to stink after a while if you don't clean them. This is why you must shower. I can smell you from the top floor. Oh, okay. He went to a friend's house to shower. He was that scared. Even there, he kept his range of vision upwards, looking for a bulge or a lump or a crack, a sagging bit of ceiling. At his friend's house, the ceiling seemed flat. His host was gracious enough to let him shower there, so he made it quick. James had been a lifelong friend of Jean, and he didn't mind it any time Jean came over drunk or stoned, asking to spend the night. They had played in the sandbox together at ages 3 and 4, traded Pokemon cards at ages 7 and 8. Their mothers were work friends and had both gotten pregnant within 6 months of each other. James was born in May. Jean was born in November. The two went to separate schools and daycares, but had seen each other through their mothers visiting each other. Jenny was only 2 years younger than Jean. She had always had a crush on James, but was too afraid to do anything about it. Everyone had known for a while, but as they became well into their adulthood, it all changed. Instead of several times a week, like when Jean and James were in middle school, it became once a month. After a while, with work and college, and bills and homework and girls and hobbies, the distance grew each day as the baby fat finally faded. And it was more like every once in a blue moon that they saw each other. James, I've been tripping about something. Something really hazardous. I can't live in my house anymore. I keep seeing it collapsing in my mind. How do you mean? James looked over behind Jean, then looked back to keep eye contact. He flipped the eggs he was frying and threw cheese slices on them before turning off the stove top. Well, it's super old. I hear creaks every time Jenny walks upstairs. Sometimes the creaks are straight up cracking sounds, and the trains, oh God, the trains. Every time one passes by, I feel like we're ants on top of a wobbling Jenga castle. What year was it built in? 1968. A famous writer lived in it, but he passed away shortly after moving in, so it wasn't marked as a long-lived house. Which famous writer? James's eggs were placed on 2 pieces of toast that were buttered up perfectly like a magazine cover. He handed one to Jean. Hell if I know. I just need to figure out, though. I just need to figure out what to do. I can try and sell the house and the land, but I can't imagine living anywhere else. I love it here. Most people in this town do nothing but complain about how dead it is, but I say it's alive, just in a different way. I swear, sometimes the street lights have ghosts in them, directing us to collide into each other, pulling tricks on us. And one day, the authorities are going to catch on. The clock tower chimes at 15 till the hour, and nobody talks about it. But this whole town is built on a cave system. What if an earthquake goes off, like that one they predict will make Indiana explode, along with a cracking line going through the southeast? Just the right amount of shaking and weight proportion, and whoosh! A whole town sunk into a great abyss or collapse on itself. Jean's hands began to shake as they tightened up and cramped. His neck, too, stiffer than fossil wood. His thumb was flattening the toast and sliding in the butter and the egg, which almost burnt him. Hey, man, you really seem worried. I didn't know that stuff about the cave systems, but I think you need to relax, man. Don't let this stuff get to you. Jean took a bite of food and continued. We have more caves than any other state in the U.S., and we're discovering new ones every day. A decade we thought we had 7,000. Now they're saying well over 15,000. They're discovering cave paintings and Native American artifacts, prehistoric animals. But about your house, Jean, I know a house inspector. Maybe if I can persuade him, tell him your story and concerns, maybe he'll look at it just out of curiosity. He'll do it for free. I'll cover it for you, Jean. I think you need this. You do that for me, James? Jean finally felt human after hearing James say all this. Sure thing, buddy. I'll shoot him a text right now. James pulled out his phone and did the deed. They played some PlayStation 4 games, then some Xbox games. A great wind blew outside. As they remained inside, they were unaware of the swift change of weather. Dark clouds rumbled up above like titans, awakening after many eons of undisturbed sleep. Litter scurried down the streets and clung on to bushes and mailboxes. Leaves flurried down from trees and made little whirlwinds with dust and trash in the mix. The power went out after a paralyzing rain came slamming down on the roof of James's house. They lit some candles and played some poker and discussed movies and books, directors and authors, gains and food. James had lots of salty and sweet snacks for them to munch on, even though it was midnight. They played cards and dominoes. Unexpectedly, James' cell phone let off a text alert sound. He checked his phone. It was his friend, the house inspector that he spoke of. Hey Gene, Bob texted back. Weird time for him, but that's because he just got back from a trip and spent a long portion of the trip traveling with the storm eastward, but he said he'd like to come by tomorrow after the weather clears up, and maybe we'll carpool in your car to your house and he can see the situation as long as the weather permits us to. Gee, James, I really appreciate all of this. Tomorrow would be perfect. It's my last day of vacation, and I would love some closure on all of this. The two conversed in the dark, hearing the roar of the storm and rain outside, sometimes staring out the window at all the flashing lights of the lightning. It was a real light show, like a paparazzi of flash photographer angels darting through the sky, scanning the earth, gliding along the warm fronts, straight winds. The white lights were almost disorienting. They would turn back to the candle whose shadows would dance like a miniature fire, licking the walls with its warmth and particular shade of solemn gratitude. Gene fell asleep on his friend's couch with a satisfied mind about the next day's affairs. James rested well, too, with much wine, smoke, and food in his system. The two had long hung out for 12 hours that day. Next morning, a knock came to the door. Bob Phelps was a jack of all trades. He did leather work, plumbing, carpentry, electrician work, landscaping, roofing, and those are all the ones that James knew of. What he didn't know about Bob was that he loved to collect nature documentaries and spend the afternoon after a long day of work and watching them and carving wood. He carved chess pieces and glued boards together to sell online and at the occasional craft fair. Bob Phelps would go kayaking with some of his church friends, and yes, he was a church man. Gene and James were quite secular and spent Sundays at work and enjoying a stiff drink or a joint afterwards. Bob Phelps read lots of religious material and found Christ in just about anything, as long as it wasn't inanimate. This didn't create a problem between Bob and James, for they were only work friends for a little while and kept in touch through social media. Howdy there, I'm Bob. What's your name? I'm Gene. James was telling me you were able to come see my house. Let's say I'll do it if you pull out a 20. I can get some cash for you on the way there if that's okay. Gene looked at the time. That sounds good. They drove down the suburban street to a highway that took them 15 minutes into the rural part of town. They stopped at a gas station first for an ATM and then passed a few churches and barns. When they got to Gene's place, Bob said, "Ah, yes, that's definitely an old house." This made Gene a little nervous. They walked around the outside with Bob looking here and there and using this and that tool, studying every corner, every panel. Bob collected his tools together to go in, and as Gene stopped staring blankly at the porch to let him in, Bob said, "Outside looks all right." "Wow, that's crazy." Gene sighed in relief. but was still wary of any other findings to come. James stayed outside, looking off into the trees, took out his camera, and began taking some pictures while the other two toured the house. "Anyone else live here, or is it just you?" "Oh, my sister lives upstairs. I have this crazy fear that someday the top floor is going to come crashing down on me, or with me falling into the bottom floor. I'm probably overthinking stuff, but I just have to know." Gene had timed this whole visit so that a train would be passing by while the inspection was taking place. One began to near. Pennies started clattering. Then the glass coffee tables would start buzzing. The light fixtures swayed, and it felt as if the house was actually wobbling when Bob started laughing. "I wouldn't live in this house forever, but you got a sound structure here. I'd give the place another 20 years, then I'd start worrying about tearing it down, rebuilding something. 20 years ought to be enough time to plan." "Gee, Bob, I really appreciate your input. I guess I'm just a little nervous. That's all." Gene's heart was melted by the outcome of the inspection. He put to rest all these fears. He drove the two men back into town, stopped at a movie store, and bought a film. Jenny was having some friends over tonight, and he thought he might make his famous lasagna for everyone and have them pick out a movie. Then he figured he'd do some reading and catch up on sleep. Jenny never came home, though. When he returned to the house, all her belongings were gone, and there was a loving note thanking him for letting her stay there as long as she had. A big wad of cash under a jar of coffee she had made for him. She had found a place in town close to her job. That's nice," Gene thought, in a real bittersweet tone. He knew that she and her friends were at wherever she was now. He knew he had already spent a lot of time with the one friend he had. Now it was just Gene Portman. Loneliness was inevitable. He was already used to it. He had just forgotten that he was used to it. The house's silence became a factory of creaks and thumps and pops as the temperature changed. All around him, accompanying him, whispering secrets of past tenants and homeowners, the house sighed and gasped and seemed to bend. And while he was content with the day's findings, eating a large portion of lasagna all to himself, watching the new film he had bought, a big lump began to form, and a sagging bulge hung over his head. He first noticed the lump the morning after Jenny left. It wasn't leaking water. It was just there, like an imprint left in a seat, but convex and not concave. It hung over the sink in the bathroom, and so he decided to use the upstairs bathroom and check and see if the floor had any indentations. As he ran his hand along the railing of the stairs and walked carefully up the steps, he could see the wall up ahead past the stairs. The floral wallpaper really brought it out. The whole wall was seemingly beginning to weave in and out, or wobble. There was a creaking sound, like a rusty hinge, and it emanated throughout the whole house. Gene was having trouble breathing at this point. He had to stop to collect himself. To the right, The rest of the railing along the upstairs hall was also staggering like something out of a nightmare funhouse. He went to the bathroom when a draft was picking up. A window had been left open in there. From it he heard the sound of an approaching train. He acted quickly and ran outside before the house finally imploded. He smoked 3 cigarettes, one for each train set of cars passing by. The house had not imploded. It was quite normal, actually. Just sitting there as it normally did. A text alert rung on his phone. It was the theme of The Godfather, and the text was from Jenny. "Hey, sorry about leaving the way I did. I hope you're doing okay." He responded, "No problem, sis. Just still having trouble with the house. It's getting worse. You remember when we were kids? You couldn't go to sleep at night because you swore that the boogeyman was always behind you, watching you sleep in the dark? Well, it turned out it was just your imagination, and your fears were coming into play. Not to mention, maybe some issues with mom and dad fighting all the time. But what I'm getting at is maybe you should really find some work. I know the inheritance has kept us both afloat, but if you worked, you could have your mind on other things instead of scaring yourself to death." "Perhaps you're right," Jean texted her back. "I guess I'll try my hand at that dying video rental store. It's at least something." "That'd be perfect. How about I come stay this weekend? Tomorrow night and Thursday night I'll be working, but I have a 3-day weekend coming up. We can make your resume together." "You're always welcome here, sis." Gene began to walk inside to dress his video rental store best. He drove to town and put in an application at Dr. Video's DVD and game rentals. He got the job on the spot. They wanted him to start the next Tuesday. Maybe, Gene thought, things will get better. A month later, and things did not get better. The bulges, the lumps in the ceiling, the cracks along the walls, the wobbling and staggering, the zooming in and out of wallpaper, fixtures, and ceilings haunted him until he just sat in his bed doing nothing but zoning out and losing himself in what he thought was an illusion. He didn't touch any of his films or his VHSs, none of his DVDs or even his records or books. He didn't answer any of his calls or texts. Hell, his phone's battery had died and he hadn't noticed. A knock came at the door. It was Friday, 1 p.m., and Jenny was waiting for someone to answer. She knew Gene was home, for his vehicle was outside collecting leaves. She still had a key to the house and welcomed herself in. She saw the normal-looking house, but found a very troubled-looking Gene. One whose eyes were hollowed out and wrinkled, surrounded by pale skin. He was as skinny as a rail and stinky. It was an odor she couldn't resist commenting on. "Gene, what the hell? Are you okay? You know if you want to get hired, you just have to shower." "I got the job," a monotone voice answered from the lifeless man sitting upright in his bed wearing his striped pajamas. "Well, that's great. Where at?" Doctor video. That's perfect. I knew you could get that job. Now, Gene, what's going on? You smell. You look like you just fought in the Pacific War and seen some shit. What the fuck? Don't tell me you're still, Are you still seeing things? I think I'm just seeing the vibrations. Okay. Now look, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cook you some breakfast. We're getting the hell out of town for the rest of the day. I'll get dressed, take a shower. We gonna go shopping for some work clothes. Gene obeyed his sister with an unchanged face. The house stood still for the first time in days. Maybe it was a doctor he needed to see, he began to consider. They went out to the local thrift stores and got some polos and khakis. Breakfast and coffee snapped Gene out of his stupor. Shopping seemed to get his mind out of the house. They were out so long that they had gotten hungry again, so they stopped at a Mexican restaurant, beloved by the locals. El Gato Verde. It had a green cat on its sign with a sombrero, dipping its paw into a bowl of cheese dip. So, Gene, what the hell's going on? What do you mean you're seeing vibrations? The house is moving, Jenny. There are lumps in the ceiling, in the walls, and the floors. They pop in and out of random places everywhere. The walls lean this way, and sometimes they lean that way. Whoa, okay, this is serious. I'm gonna stay the rest of the week. I'll make the commute to work, but you have to show me when this happens again. Okay, I'll do that. Gene reached for some more chips as the waiter came to take their order. They placed their orders and talked until 8:30. You ever think that maybe your friend Bob might be wrong, or maybe you're just stressed out, possibly having a breakdown of sorts? God, I don't know, Jenny. A server across the restaurant brought out a sizzling plate of fajitas for a table of 4. The smell was incensing. Well, hey, I'll stay with you this week and we'll figure something out. Jenny thumbed the screen of her phone, not really paying attention to the posts she scrolled by, concerned for her older brother. I appreciate it. Gene wiped some dip off of his freshly grown facial hair on his chin. Remember that time at Granny's? We both ran from the house because Mom and Dad were really having one of those crazy knockout fights. Granny was asleep, but woke up to answer the door for us anyways. She made us those peanut butter crunchy stacks, as she called them. It was basically just Captain Crunch and peanut butter caramelized together. Oh my God, I do remember that. That was so good. Then you stole one of mine that she gave me. Jenny playfully smacked her brother's arm with her eyes squinting in jest. I did, Gene admitted with a sentimental smile. The two reminisced and ate their food. Gene was starting to feel whole again. The rest of the weekend went by smoothly, with an occasional bout of anxiety, but Gene was finally able to sleep. Monday night, things took a turn, however. Jenny came rushing into the movie room where Gene was watching Taxi Driver. He paused the movie to ask her what was wrong, but she jerked him out of his seat with her hands grabbing his arms. Get out of the house, she screamed as the distant sound of mechanical roaring drew nearer and nearer. Gene wanted to look around the house to see if it was finally happening, if his fears were actually valid. But Jenny pulled him by the arm so roughly he could only see in blurs. He heard the house collapsing, loud bangs and crunches. He could feel dust and debris blowing up against his heels. Finally, the two stood outside as they watched the 50-something-year-old house crumble to the ground. For each set of cars that passed by, a different section of the house fell to shambles. The soil beneath their bare feet rumbled. The foundation of the house before them fell into the ground. It was a nerve-wracking thing to watch, so close to the train tracks. Jenny sobbed with her hands holding her gaping mouth, shocked at what she saw. Gene was smiling, though. He pulled out a cigarette and even began to laugh. Even though everything that was his was destroyed and unsalvageable, he howled in laughter. He just now knew he wasn't crazy.